Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there are so many different ways to story tell, but the main thing that I always tell, my followers and my audience and my clients is when you are sharing the story, you want to show like the three phases of it. So, obviously when you're on social media, you see these successful entrepreneurs flashing obviously like their cars and their money and their like Stripe accounts. And the person on the other side, they get inspired by it, but in some like portion of their mind they're like, oh, I don't think I'll be able to do it either, because they're only seeing the success part of it. So when you're sharing the story, you want to go through like the phases of like the old you, the transformational you, and then like the new you, right? So if I were to share a part of my story, I would talk about how I used to work. My last job was at a jewelry store, and I think I only worked there for like 8 days, right? As I was working there, I was scrolling through Instagram, looking at successful entrepreneurs. I'm like, why can't I do this too? And I went home that day and I was actually going on a trip to meet with my mentor, Brandon, for an event. And I told my job, I was like, hey, I'm going on this like trip, even though I just started to work, but I'm not going to be there. And that event actually led me to not go back to my job and go and start and dive deeper into my business. So if I had just focused on like, oh, now I run a successful 6-figure business, I'm speaking on stages, I wrote a best-selling book, you can do it too. People don't know the backstory of what I actually went through in order to get to that point. So
Hmm.
I think that's one of the main things, is showing how you got there too, because then it shows other people that's more possible for them. Honestly, when I tell stories, I just act as if I'm having like a conversation with my friend. Because like stories, like we naturally go into stories every single day without really knowing it. So when you're creating stories for your marketing or for your business, or if you're speaking on stages or doing a podcast like this, I don't really think about me, oh, I have to share a story. I just think about a prior experience that relates to the topic that I'm talking about. Right. So, I mean, like for me, actually, it's funny. So, my mentor, when I first met him, like he asked me, he's like, what is your story? And I was like, oh, like, what do you mean? I'm 19. I don't really have a story. Like, my life's not that interesting. But like background, which I haven't really shared quite yet, is when I was growing up, I used to be a really shy person. In high school for 4 years, I was in a really toxic relationship, and I lost my mom when I was 15. So I went through a lot. That's like my story, and I share that in my TEDx talk, and a lot of people related with that in parts of my business, right? So like I feel like sometimes when you're sharing stories, people tend to overthink it because they think they have to come up with some like rags to riches story. But even like going through your life and thinking of different epiphanies and experiences and people that you meet, that can make a big impact on you as well. So honestly, like I don't have any sort of like dialed in like broad framework of how to tell a story. It just more so um like having an experience and tag it on with the topic that you're trying to talk about. Yeah, so honestly, the first time I did a TEDx talk, it was simply by application. What people don't realize about TEDx is you don't have to be a speaker in order to give one. I had spoken before, but that's not primarily what they look at. What they look at is the story and the idea that you're actually pitching them. So what they're really finding is some sort of different revolutionary idea that will really help their audience apply in their own life and take away. So for me, my first one that I did was in Hudsonville, Michigan, and I just simply applied through the website. I I've done a lot of PR and marketing, so I'm pretty good at finding people's emails online.
Hmm.
There wasn't a specific email, but I found the coordinator's name, so I searched and found her email. So I was the one who was just following up and asking about, oh, like, when's like the process? Like, how do you guys choose speakers? And I was just being really involved. So pretty much, I did that probably for like a month and a half. And then they had their board meeting and conversations to pick speakers, and I was one of them. So that's how I gave my first one. And then my second one was actually by invite from a university that I went to. So honestly, like the process of doing one, it's pretty simple. You just go to the website and apply. But what's really, really crucial is that story and the idea that you are pitching them.